third is Suarez. Goodell comes running in. He's under it, makes the catch. Here's the throw to the plate. It's in the air. He is out! Cameron Rick hangs on! Oh, man, what a play! Deep to right field. Way up there, and way out! Second down,
Well, welcome back to the Stupid Money podcast. I was right. Unfortunately, actually, to the game, I was right. Absolutely brutal. Man, you know what the thing is too? I was pretty scared they just ran into like this magical Mets thing, which I think at times in this series it felt that way, especially in Game 4. But I'm not sure the way they played. There was a team in this playoff field they would have beat. I mean, I don't know. Like they just didn't like. I thought the Mets thoroughly outplayed them in Game 3. But other than that, like Game 1 and Game 4 were very winnable games if they just had average offense and not a complete bullpen implosion in both of those games. And I was at Game 2. I went to Game 1 and Game 2, and everyone was so hyped after they won that game on the walk-off and everything. And I'm kind of like sitting there like, we needed to do all that just to get a split at home. Like, we're screwed. And everyone else kind of felt like, people are like, oh, this is the turnaround, blah, blah. I'm like, this actually concerns me. And they just got beat in New York. And I'm not that surprised at all. I wish I was. Man, we'll get into it. There's some dudes on this team that can't be here next year. And there's some dudes that are struggling that you can't do anything with because of their contracts. And I just don't know, but that was a mess.
Yeah. I'm going to do we're recording this on Friday, the 11th. So it's a few days post Game 4.
It's actually Wheeler Bump Day today.
Yeah, we've had some time to cool off a bit, but I think the takes are still going to be pretty off of like recency bias. So like I'm going to do my best to be pretty calm revolving this. But, I said it in the series preview that the thing that worried me about us having home field advantage is that, and the series ended up paralleling our last two series with the Braves very heavily. But I said that a lot of times we see that lower seed find a way to split on the road, and then the series doesn't get back to the home field because they're so juiced up. And that was the case. It's very difficult to manage a series if you're Thompson when arguably your biggest strength all season, which was the bullpen, gives you absolutely nothing. And then, obviously it's a toss-up for me between where, the rotation and the offense kind of fall into being that second biggest strength, because both were very strong earlier in the season and both kind of tapered off a bit towards the end. But, the starters did their job this series. It wasn't the prettiest starting pitching aside from Zach Wheeler, who, that was arguably one of the best playoff starts ever in terms of dominance that he had. But especially definitely for the Phillies franchise, but, just in terms of baseball as a whole. And the offense gave you absolutely nothing outside of Bryce Harper and Nick Castellanos. It was painful to watch the at-bats. It was painful to watch the approach. I think the thing that drove me, the most insane was after Game 1, this whole thing was we have to stay in the strike zone. We have to stop chasing pitches. And I tweeted this a bunch during the first 5 of the game before the half. But, even from before the start of that game, it didn't add up to me, which there's nothing to it benching of Bohm. obviously, that's a whole different entity. But you bench him, and then you say you have to cut down on chase rate. You put it on the team, and you're just setting yourself up for what was going to happen, which was not that game, but the next game, and Mundo Sosa hit him in the back foot. They didn't practice what they preached in terms of staying in the strike zone, and I know it's overly easy to criticize them from the couch, saying why would you swing it? I've seen over 90 miles an hour. It's extremely hard to do, especially in that type of pressure pack situation. But most of these guys get paid north of $20 million a year, and they couldn't do anything to, it's easy to say we have to stop chasing, but Trey Turner did nothing to stop chasing that entire series. And I'm not going to knock Trey. Sent a tweet from Sean's account, and Turner in his career with the Phillies in the playoffs is a .313 hitter. He has a ring. There's been a lot of heat on Kevin Long in terms of what's going on with these approaches, but having thought on it the last day or two, I don't know if it's Kevin Long's fault. We've seen the offense go cold the last 2 or 3 years in the playoffs, but what is a new hitting coach going to do? All these guys are 32 years old. Your core's 32 years old. Obviously, you'd like to see some better strides with the younger guys. Stott regressed, Marsh regressed, especially
That's
the
my
second half
thing
of
with
the year.
Kevin Long too.
And Bohm did nothing. But the playoffs are going to come down to these, $300 million contracts. Aside from Harper, he struggled in New York, but for his OPS for the series is like over 1.1. So I'm not like going at Harper at all, but like, you pay all these guys all this money in the lineup. They're all in like year 10. A new hitting coach is not going to change the way Nick Castellanos approaches an at bat. And again, that's just an example because, Nick hit great in the NLDS. He has one of the highest career LDS OPSs in baseball, but we're not signing guys for NLDS OPSs. We're signing guys to get rings, and the approach is not foolproof enough to trust throughout the course of the playoffs. So like a new hitting coach would be great. I'm not against it, but if you're putting me on the spot right now, would I rather a new hitting coach to try and change guys who have been in the league for 10 years, or would I rather keep Kevin Long because of the relationship that he has with potentially getting Juan Soto? I'll keep Kevin Long and hope that the generational Ted Williams guy can, be persuaded with Kevin Long showing up.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about how to put this, but is getting rid of Kevin Long at least a wake-up call to them? Because if they're all like buddies with this guy, because I feel like you have to do something to make them uncomfortable.
I think shaking up the core is going to do that enough. We've seen, plenty of articles from Gelb that, some of the main pieces that the fan base has seen contribute the last 2 years, they're going to be moved. It seems like, according to Gelb, Marsh has like some sort of market, which is fine by me. I imagine that there's going to be at least talks revolving Bohm, and you have to do something to get off one of these big contracts if you have any intent of reshaping this thing, because they really can't go into next season running it back with these same guys, whether it's sacrificing who is arguably your most consistent hitter, especially from May through the end of the playoffs in Castellanos, or, biting the bullet and trading Walker for quite literally anybody who would take him. You have to get off of one of these $20 million contracts somehow if you have any intent of, competing in the future, because this core clearly doesn't have, the moxie or whatever to go as far as they want to go.
Yeah, it seemed like in this series that they look kind of worn out to me. The last 2 years when they got to the playoffs, there was a lot of energy, a lot of excitement, like a lot of jumping around, fooling around with them. This year, I know you were kind of down from the get-go in the series. But it didn't look the same at all compared to the last 2 years. It didn't feel the same. It was very odd. Yeah, they looked kind of checked out, and they just didn't play good after the All-Star break, and they went through those weird stretches, and it didn't look like they were all that excited to be there during those stretches, and that kind of looked the same as it did here at the end. So, I don't know if behind the scenes something was going on there, but after the All-Star break, they just seemed like a totally different group, and it transferred over to the playoffs, and we saw what happened. So, yeah, Marsh has to be out of here. It's just he gave you absolutely nothing in the second, outside of April, and this is the second year in a row. Actually, he's giving you absolutely nothing outside of April. I thought Bohm improved as a player this season, but he's a head case, and now we're only 2 years away from him going to be asking for a contract he doesn't deserve. So, if you're going to make a move with that and sell high on the value, and you want to bring in Alex Bregman or some kind of stopgap until hopefully Adam Miller's ready, I think you have to think about that. I mean, I think Stott stays. They need him. They need his versatility, because I don't know what they think about Miller long term, but someone has to play shortstop, because I don't think Trey Turner's playing shortstop much longer. So, I think that just by default keeps Stott around. The other two, I would very gladly at this point get rid of. I think they need improvements there. But in terms of shaking up that core, I just don't know, because Real Muto and Schwarber are done after next year, and that's a lot of money coming off.
Yeah.
You lose a lot of money in the next 2 seasons. Schwarber and Real Muto come off after next year, and then it's Walker and Castellanos the year after that. So, that is a ton of money coming off, but I don't know. They have a lot to figure out. They need to find guys that just make contact more. They need Gene Segura type guys back in there. They need, for how much Reese Hoskins drives me crazy, the dude work counts. They need guys that could work counts and make contact. And, I kind of thought Stott and Bohm could be guys like that. And this year it just didn't happen, especially with Stott after what he did the year before. And last year, actually the past 2 years, they were grinders. They tired pitchers out. And that's why they put up pretty gaudy numbers at times in the playoff games, because they got the bullpens quick. And that just did not happen this year. They were out at bats early. It seems like some of those guys like Turner and Marsh, every time you blinked, and Castellanos too, they were down 0-2 every at bat. I don't know. I'm fine running it back with the pitching staff. I think you make some minor tweaks with the bullpen, and maybe at the deadline you could get yourself a lockdown closer if who knows what's going on with what team when. But I don't know how many years Devin Williams has left in Milwaukee, but if they go downwards instead of upwards, he's someone who could be out there. But to me, it's all on an offense retweak, and how much of it you can do, I don't know. But this was just crazy bad to watch. Obviously I picked them to lose, but they could have 3 of those 2 of the 3 games they lost were very winnable. And honestly, the other game, game 3, they did some little things early on. I don't think that game gets out of hand as it did either. So I don't know. They didn't look like they wanted to be there. They didn't do the little things that are necessary in October.
Yeah, and not necessarily doing October, but Brett Myers tweeted this out too, and he's like, this core just didn't hate the Mets bad enough for it being a rivalry series in the playoffs. It seems like, the last 2 years we were not, because the Braves are obviously one of our rivals, interdivisional rivals, but I think at least, me personally, just because of where we're at, how Philadelphia and New York kind of, in terms of structural cities in our country and the location and stuff, our fan bases hate each other much more than a Philadelphia hates an Atlanta team. And it seemed like the players hate Atlanta much more than they hate the Mets. And it was kind of like, oh, we're not playing the Braves in the playoffs. What do we have to get up for? And it seemed very lackadaisical, going through the motions at times. Like even defensively, they weren't crisp. Bohm obviously made some Bohm plays at third base, which, he's been a decent fielder lately. So that was a little bit of regression, but like right before the Lindor home run, the difference in cleanliness in the field, Lindor gets that ground ball at shortstop that Turner got and snaps it home, and they probably get a double play at first base. Turner has to take 3 steps and make sure he gets the ball out of his glove and gives a good throw to home plate because he's not crisp defensively. And then all of a sudden, you don't have a base open to walk Lindor. Not that they necessarily would have, but you can at least pitch around him. And boom, grand slam. So, it's little things like that where it just seems like they do that too much. We saw multiple times, which we've seen all season really, but in this series, the leadoff guy gets to second and, they do nothing. We saw it with the Castellanos line drive double play. Schwarber walked, Turner walked, Harper comes up and swings at 3 sliders that aren't nowhere near the strike zone when Minaya hasn't been able to throw a sweeper all night. And then Castellanos lines out into a double play. They saw 6 pitches after 2 straight walks and made 3 outs. And only 3 of those pitches were in the strike zone. It was just like, I guess it's weird to say that, the 2 guys that basically obviously Stott had a big hit, but won them game 2. The moment in game 3 was just way too big for them. And it kind of showed the difference in approach at bats. Alonso got up there later in games with guys on base, and he focused his sights on the outside part of the plate. Obviously, he got a few strikeouts going inside of him, but he worked and his if it was there, whereas we were trying to hit the 5-run homer every time we went up to the plate, it seemed.
Yeah, I want to make this last point, but you kind of just brought this up, the whole about the pressure thing. In every series in 2022, they were up 1-0. And it never got worse than 1-1 until they got to 2-2 in the World Series. And then they rolled over and died the second it became 2-2 in the World Series. Last year, same deal. Went through the wild card round 2-0, 1-1 in the division, then just ran through the Braves at home in the 2 games. Then in the NLCS, up 2-0, and then it got to 2-2, and they actually played well in game 5, but then they lose game 6 and they roll over in game 7. So they started this series 0-1, and the rest of the series looked exactly how they looked at the end of the 2 series they lost last year. And it didn't take until the end of the series. It was the whole series. The second they get down, they just don't look right. And there's not a lot of winning experience in there. Schwarber obviously won a World Series with the Cubs, but let's remember he was hurt for the majority of that playoff run. And Turner has a ring with the Nationals. That's it, really. I don't know. It's kind of why I need Alex Bregman in here. I feel like I need a dude who's been around the block in the World Series 8 times, it feels like. I need Juan Soto, who I don't think that's going to happen, who has a World Series and is making another deep playoff run right now. They got to get dudes that have been there. There's just too many deer in the headlight looks when they get behind, and it can't go on that way. And that's the adjustment I think they need to make.
Yeah, they need some sort of energy shift, like you kind of just mentioned, because I don't know how you have the comeback at home in game 2 like you do, and then come out and just lay 2 absolute duds and look completely lifeless in games 4. And it's tough because obviously they split at home, but at least for me personally, like the the energy that was around this team and this core for the last 3 years is gone there. I'm not a huge NBA fan, but I watch enough ESPN to follow. I follow WIP and stuff like that. This core is the Sixers now. No matter what they do in the regular season, nothing's going to matter until it gets to October, because we've seen them, improve in the regular season the last 3 years and then regress in the playoffs every single year. So with this core, with this team, the way that Middleton seems committed to spending money, and with guys like Harper and Trey Turner and Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola at the top of your payroll every year, we're now past what it was like in, even 2022, even last year. This team should expect, and the fan base should expect them to make the playoffs every single year. So it sounds stupid or cliche, and I think this might have actually hurt the team this year, but it's kind of like just get me to October or the playoffs or whenever it's later in the season and the games actually matter, and that's when I'll be able to determine what kind of team this actually is, because clearly the first team to 40 wins and what they did in April and May meant absolutely nothing to the end result and what the roster actually consisted of. They weren't good since London, really, but they especially weren't good in August and September, and the playoffs reflected that. So until further notice, this is a team that it'll take some winning to get at least me, but I think majority of the fan base to fully believe that they're capable of it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It is what it is at this point. Yeah, that's gonna do it for this one. I don't want to talk about this anymore. We'll be back sometime after the World Series to talk about the off season, because there's a lot that's gonna go on. So I don't think anything crazy is gonna happen before then. I don't think Rob Thompson's gonna get fired, but
no, I don't think he should either.
Yeah, so we'll be back sometime after. God, who the hell's gonna win the World Series? Can the Tigers or the Guardians win it? Can the Tigers or the Guardians just win, please?
Painter pitches this weekend. We're back.
Whatever. All right, we'll talk in November.